Hello, my name is Preston Blevins, and I'm on the board of directors for the ASCM San Diego chapter. And it's my privilege tonight to introduce our speaker on the lecture, A Comprehensive Approach to Sustainable Water Management. Dr. Ercin has over 20 years of international experience in water management and sustainability. And his training is really one one in engineering and also sustainability itself. He specializes in water accounting and use, and that includes all aspects of water management. And you might think of it in terms of the 3 Ps, the people, planet, and profit. Instead of profit, just insert economy. Dr. Ercin is a Water Footprint Network alumni who developed a new science-based set of management tools, water management tools. And he's a pioneer in helping companies, large corporations, develop strategies on water use and allocation. And he's also worked with large government institutions, for example, the World Bank, the United Nations, and the EU Council, which in fact deals with priority and policy setting. He is a prolific writer. He's authored over 50 white papers and articles, and he's participated in numerous workshops as a keynote, and in some cases as a keynote speaker. And he's currently leading projects for the European Union on sustainable water use and management in agriculture, industry, and river basins. So let's welcome Dr. Ercin.
Yeah, great. So just briefly, I want to do a disclaimer. Some of the pictures which I couldn't change because these are infographics and some graphs from papers or other studies or studies of mine. And you will see mostly a metric system in it, which is in liters in terms of volumetric or meter cube, cubic meter, which is approximately, is like 1 liter is approximately 0.26 gallons, US gallons. And like, if you see a liter, just divide by 4, it's easy. And then approximately 100 liters of water is 26 gallons. 1,000 liters is 1 meter cube. It's approximately 264 gallons. So if you see this, and ask me if you don't get the scale of the units, and it's approximately, maybe you understand this way, so I want to say it. What I would like to talk about today is first, why water and business? I mean, of course, we all know that, there's a drought. We all know that there's a water shortage. We cannot access in summer. There is a climate change. But what is the interest in businesses? There is, I believe most of you are businesses and manufacturers, or maybe interested in some of that. But what is the interest? Because interest in businesses about water changes according to who you are speaking to. Like if I speak to a operations factor manager, it is a different. If I speak to someone on the management side, if I speak to someone who is a bit higher, sitting in higher up, not on the technology part, but maybe on the on strategy part, the question is different. Or if you talk to someone like big companies like Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Starbucks, the question is completely something else. So I would like to first talk about this a bit. And I would like to introduce you to the concept of water footprint. Slightly, I will go a bit on the technical side, but please, if you don't get it, which is possible in some slides, please ask me. But I would like to more emphasize on why water footprint. What does it bring it to you? And then we come to the third part of the presentation, which is how can you use this, or how did people use it? I would like to give you some applications from different sectors and different levels. I want to talk about a bit how investors think about it and use it, like the banks, finance institutes. Mostly my examples are European brands, but they're multinational. like Heineken. I don't know if you know Heineken. It's a beer brand. I assume it's popular as well in the US. It's based in Amsterdam. There's Unilever. Unilever is a big company in producing lots of food and beverages. Coca-Cola, of course, you know. Pepsi, you know. But also investor bankers. I want to give examples. Also the hotel chains. How do they use this? And also maybe, I don't know if you know Steel, Tata Steel. It's an Indian company. And if we have time, I want to give some examples of how they use this concept and what do they do about it. Maybe they can inspire you. It's be on the different levels. So let's start with the why water and business is the key. So if you look at this World Economic Forum, the companies, these are big companies, these are managing a large amount of, they see water as a big risk. So it's actually, if you look at this, almost 40%, they think that's top on their agenda on the risk management. Why? Because actually water shortage is everywhere. I mean, today, Southern Europe, there is no irrigation water. There's, I mean, in California, it's known that the elements, the agriculture, the loss of lots of water resources, who gets water when there's a drought, you know, the reservoirs are empty. So within the next 10 years, they think it's a very important and official thing that water crisis is important. And we saw some examples, interesting examples. For example, because of water issues, Coca-Cola shuts down its factories in India. Why? Why? Because it's ultimately, they're not really the core of the problem, but there's so much negativity about it. What I mean is that people are complaining. The company came, Coca-Cola came to our village, we can't have water anymore. And then the new facility just shut down. Coca-Cola just left with all this billion-dollar investment. It's just left without any use. These things can happen. These things has happened. Or for example, the big textile companies, European companies in Bangladesh, in India, in China were faced with lots of problems. The NGOs, the environmentalist activists, blame them for the problems in terms of the pollution, in terms of scarcity, and then actually it's nice that this make these companies do some effort in going those locations and bringing water resources into clean into clean versions. They cleaned them. They promoted cleaner production and less water usage, and brought the technologies to the countries like India, the China, and then also Bangladesh. So these are getting more on policy agenda. I know that you're based in California. I think water is all the time is on the agenda, and then every summer and every year, and throughout here, probably you hear a lot. Some of you might have experienced already some problems which related to water. So this will increase more, of course, because climate is changing. And then we know that the extreme weather events, the floods, too much water, droughts, too little water, and then this will increase more their intensity. We become more frequent. Actually, that is the biggest impact that the climate change will bring to in our life. So we cannot find water anymore. So maybe a drought, which is happening once in every 10 years, will happen once in every 5 years. Of course, this changes specifically on that, by geographic location, or also by year or where you are, and then what kind of business you do. So the companies see this as a water risk. As you said, there is not enough water, there's scarcity. Because of that, first of all, water price can fluctuate, but also raw material prices can fluctuate. For example, we know that because of problems of agriculture, some raw materials, if you're producing beverages and food manufacturers, your raw material is briefly, it's mainly the crop that's grown in the fields. If there's a drought, for example, in 2012, in US, there's in maize decreased a lot in Mississippi River Basin. And then the prices increase. Of course, you don't immediately see the prices increase, but because it is used as a feed for animal, and then we can see the rises of the meat prices the next year, the following year. Why? There is a drought because the feed, soybean that is produced, the maize is produced, is not, yields are reduced and is not there anymore. The supply prices increases. So if you look at that one, maybe you are a milk packaging or you're producing milk, but your supply chain might have problems. This is particularly important when you think about agricultural supply chains, if you're having a food or beverage. And then this is raw material supply. Of course, what you see, for example, water is not always droughts. Water is also about floods. For example, in Thailand, there was a big flood. And what happened is that the silicons used for the chips, for computers and for electronics are produced there. Because of the big floods events happening in Thailand, is actually there was a shortage of raw material. It's not the agricultural, but it's also the raw material couldn't be produced because of the floods events happening. So these things about people are thinking, the businesses are thinking about the water risk. But the most important one is damaged reputation. What I mean is this. If you talk about a consumer brand, which is producing, has a name, the biggest concern is about their brand. They don't want anything happen to their brand image because ultimately it influences, it affects the prices, it affects your image, your relationship with customers, your relationship with your investors, everything. For example, I mean, Coca-Cola didn't shut down that factory in India because of the problems, but because of its image. It thinks it will disturb its image more than the factory price. So, and ultimately, if you talk with the big brands today, 500 brands, Fortune 500 brands, this is damaged reputation comes first. And opportunities, of course, if you think everything in a risk perspective, that is a bit limited. You have to see the opportunities as well. So first of all, you become more efficient. Water efficiency is not only about water, it's also about energy. If you're water efficient, you use less water. Less water means less energy used to clean the water, to supply the water and everything. Front runner, this is important. Many companies are doing water sustainability, and to become the front runner, the leader of sustainability. So this is a new marketing element, and this cannot be underestimated, because ultimately, if you're a front runner, if you're a visionary person, people follow you. I mean, when you look at the new generation, I'm in my mid-40s. I mean, I'm seeing the people who are in mid-20s or coming new generation is really think about climate change, environmental impacts, and for them to buy something, particularly in Europe, I cannot speak out of it. The consumers, when you go to supermarket, people look at, hey, is this egg produced in a sustainable way? Am I buying a product with low carbon footprint? How is the water use of this product? Oh, shall I reduce my meat consumption? These are really on consumer agenda. People think about it. People implement in their life. And what is happening in Europe is that companies are tapping into this sustainability and try to become the front runner, the leader in their field. So this is an opportunity, actually. And of course, from a continuity perspective, operational supply chain continuity, if you are more efficient, more water productive, and if your suppliers are more productive, using less water, more sustainable, then it means actually your production, supply chain, raw materials are much more in protection. Of course, brand image is everything. It's like being front runner, and brand image comes in hand. And then if you see this, how it is important for example, if you speak to a manager who owns the company, Maybe the brand image is really important. What we see here in these days, what's happening is that also it is about business to business relationships. For example, when a company is buying materials from another company, it asks environmental, are they efficient? Are their environmental, how do you say, portfolio or profile? I mean, we're saying that, how is your water use? How are you water efficient? What's your water footprint? Do you pollute water? This is not only the big businesses buying other things from other businesses, but it's also about investors, investment bankers. I will show you examples towards the end of my presentation, is that we work with big European banks who are investing in different parts of the world to the manufacturers. And what they do, they have, you know, to get the credit, there is a risk assessment they do, financial risk, owner, you know, there's due diligence, and they also do these environmental checks to give the money to you. Like they check their water footprints. Are they high? Can be reduced? What they do? Are they in a risky location? What is happening in future in that location? Am I investing my money somewhere that is environmentally sustainable, somewhere water sustainability is important? So they do this into their thinking, decision making. So these are all about, you can think about when you think water risk and water opportunities in water management. So this is Ercin. Ercin is located, for the people who doesn't know, it's located in Central Asia, and it was a big lake. Look at this. This was in between Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and Tajikistan, and it is the source of livelihood in that region. And so what's happening? Why I give this example? Because this shows a very important element in our life. Look at this one. When you look at this Ercin is diminishes. And now we come to this, today is actually, there is no such lake. Lake is gone. What does it mean lake is gone? The people who live around cannot use water anymore. The river ecosystem died. There is no river dolphins anymore. And there is no water for people for go fishing anymore. There is no fishing activity. Why? Why is it happening? Simple. Because actually there's a big cotton produced there, and that cotton is used for export. Where? The textile that is used in, for example, produced in Europe, in Turkey. Those are countries, or India, Pakistan. And ultimately, these products also come to the US. Somehow, this cotton is a very water-intensive product. Is really related to this cotton production, is the source of the problems in Ercin. So ultimately, we need to understand this also. How when we use water, when we consume products, it's not just about us. It's also for other people. We are all interconnected. I mean, we are interconnected by trade. We are interconnected to the water resources otherwise in the world. So I will show you, for example, where the US is connected. And US is mostly, if you think about it as a country, is really exporting lots of commodities. And some of the problems are happening in the US, water problems, are not just because of internal production, internal need, but also for external and exporting businesses. And then this is also important to understand where your water resources are used for what reason, and what can be done for about it. So I know that some products, whenever I check where is it coming from, and I try to understand the impacts that my purchase, my consumption pattern. This water sustainability is not about only the drink water in your tap, or is also what you consume and where it is produced, how it is produced. I will show you some examples about it. Of course, water problems is not about water scarcity, but also there's water pollution as well. And people don't think much about it, but water pollution is not about only industry, but there's a big pollution related to agriculture because of the pesticides used, fertilizers used, and this all brings lots of problems to the groundwater groundwater pollution. I give you a small example about this. I don't know. I hope some of you maybe visited the Netherlands or know something about the Netherlands. Netherlands is a very small country, and it's a very wet country. It always rains. Everywhere is green. Everywhere is full of water. And then this country, like most of the European countries, is very strict on pollution directives. It's very pollution control. You have to treat all your wastewater almost to the drinking water level. I mean, some people can say that you can drink it. And it's really, I mean, top of the notch, just like this perfect infrastructure, perfect treatment facilities, wastewater treatment facilities, water treatment facilities. There's everywhere is water. They have big lakes and everything. But they have water pollution problems. Why? Because of agriculture, because of the cows. I mean, Netherlands is famous for its cheese, for its milk, for its dairy industry. And actually what happens is that they have too many cows. And funnily, in these days, in the parliament of the Netherlands, what they talk about is that how many cows should be killed in order to clean this water or the environment. It's so funny because that's what's in the debate is going on. Oh, it's like 2,000 animals or 1,000 animals. So it's a bit different level of understanding. But groundwater is super polluted. The reason is agriculture. And that is invisible because ultimately they solved all these industrial problems on the pollution level, but they forget about the intensified agricultural activities, particularly dairy and meat industry. So this is a brief introduction. So water is important. It is scarce where there is a competition, and we have to be efficient. And that is where water footprint concept come into the picture. Water footprint. What is water footprint? First of all, we need to understand where it is coming from. The water footprint is basically coming from simple question, how much water we need for production and consumption. You can see that in this picture. Everything we produce, everything we use, consume needs water to be produced. It's almost, maybe there's almost nothing is produced without water. And I love this picture because it shows where reality, the food you eat, the t-shirt you wear, the computers you use, the electronics, the energy, everything needs water to be produced. And this is the main understanding of what water footprint is. Simply, water footprint refers to the total amount of water consumed and polluted. So this is traditionally, when you look at the water management, both in industry, both in agriculture, always the water use or consumption is different or separate than the water pollution. And I think this is one of the most important innovative element of what water footprint brings to the table, is that it sees water pollution as a water consumption. It's just simply, the logic is this: if there's a pollution, which means the other people cannot use it anymore unless you treat it so well. Is there a question?
Yeah, I do have a question. This is Ramon Diaz, and this topic is dear to my heart. I deal with water treatment. When you look at the total amount of water consumed and polluted, I'm kind of bringing into my head material balance. Of course, there's recycling too as well. I am in Chandler, Arizona. It's a suburb of Phoenix. I used to work at Intel Semiconductors, and they do recycle a lot of water, and I'm sure other industries do too as well. The city manages its water resources really well. So when you look in here at this slide over here, I'm sure that there's water recycling as well. So you have the total balance between what's coming in, makeup water, versus what's being polluted, how much of that polluted water can be recycled back, and then what would be the amount that cannot be, recycled or have to be treated or disposed in a different manner. I'm sure that's taken into account, correct?
Yeah, water footprint, if you recycle it, you reduce your water footprint.
Right.
If you clean it, you reduce your water footprint. Of course, if you buy, if for example, it happens that some areas you get very dirty water and some people have to clean it and then give it back a cleaner water than what you get. It's actually, it reduces your water footprint. So water footprint concept inherently says if you recycle, water recycling, if you do reuse, and a cleaning is you reduce your water footprint. And then it actually promotes, and so ultimately this pollution here, also dimension, really puts the water footprint in as an indicator, which shows that your efforts to be seen by outer world, and that's I think is quite important by many producers, and or to communicate your efforts on water sustainability or reduction of water wastewater to the outer world.
I presume that there's no levels. So, for instance, the city of Chandler, they have reclaimed water, which is not potable water in terms of you can drink it. However, it can be used to, irrigation systems and so forth. So there's different grades of course, recycling, because there's money involved in trying to get that water to potable water. But at least there's some benefit that it's been regained from the water used. So I'm assuming that I'm sure that there's a bit more complexity to this in terms of, the water has to be treated to some point and then used, again, for irrigation if that's the case, agricultural purposes. It's not good enough for drinking, but it's good enough for other things.
Mm-hmm. No, it's true. Is reclaimed water is particularly, it's used for irrigation a lot, as far as I know. And I'm not going into that calculations, but ultimately water footprint calculations is addresses these reclaimed water parts, how you address it, and how you can count it in the water counting part of it. It's like if you think about like a carbon accounting, there is a water footprint accounting, and it has those elements incorporated, how you address it. Unfortunately, I don't want to go into that details of calculations of anything. I'm just today speaking a bit really broad way, because normally if we work with companies at least 2 days of engagement to get to that level, and I'm happy that you asked it, because ultimately this is one of the, I think, the key elements the water footprint brings, is that you look at not only the water use and efficiency, water pollution, wastewater, you merge them under the same umbrella and see all water management in as a one simplified, and not simplified, but as a more coherent approach to the water efficiency and productivity at the same time.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so what I was saying is that this water consumption pollution is one. So it's water pollution is ultimately water consumption, and to see this is important because it's ultimately, as we just briefly discussed, is that you can use also the reclaimed water. You can also use this reuse water, wastewater resources as your own water resource, and that can affect your water footprint. To understand this water footprint is multidimensional. What does it mean is that it is geographically and temporally explicit indicator. What does it mean? Water use changes per time. So look at this map. When you look at this map, this is now February. This is a global map of globe. And light blue means low water footprint. Dark blue means high water footprints. So this is globally what you can see is that in different parts of the world, water footprint, which is an indicator of water consumption, changes. So this is temporal dimension. So this is October now, so it becomes November, so and then December and January. So water use is not a static thing. In summer, in Northern Hemisphere, of course, we use more water. But in southern, in winter, it changes on the southern hemisphere, so like in countries like India or Pakistan. And then, so this is important to understand. Our water footprint changes per month, per day is actually. But if you look at this water availability, it also changes per month, per day. And when you look at this also, the image on the right side, the light blue is that less water available, dark blue is more water available. But what you can see this one is that even the same month, the degree of the blueness are not the same. So when there is more water, probably there is less water use, and where there's less water, there is more water use. Your water footprint is high. So it is important to understand this, because ultimately that's what we call it water scarcity. When you look at this, is that water scarcity happens because there's more water use than water available, which means that there is environmental degradation. And in the lower graph, and then you can see there's actually the green ones, there is no water scarcity. The red, yellow to red, the water scarcity increases a lot. So you can see that here, the Mississippi for the US and the Colorado, and then how it changes, and then the colors for each month. So this is important to understand. The second one is the pollution we talked about. Look at this one. This is nitrogen-related water pollution, which green values, there is no pollution. There is the red, yellow to red is the pollution increases. This is also changing per, I don't have the time dimension in this one, but there you can see that there's actually lots of water pollution is different around the world. And it's also for different chemicals, it's also different. This is the phosphorus related pollution. In Europe, I don't know how it works in the US, but water pollution is not addressed much with concentrations. That idea is old, and where it's changing the policies based on the amount of pollutant load in terms of kilograms, in terms of mass, in terms of, so it's a bit different approach. So we give the permission to people who use the pollutes the water, not in terms of you have to clean to this concentration levels, but you have to give this amount of load into the environment. There's the maximum caps and those kind of things. So I don't know how it works in the US, maybe it's a different approach. This is important. Water footprint, first of all, is about water consumed. What does it mean water consumed? Is water use and water consumption, or water withdrawal and water consumption are two different things. Water, you can withdraw water and give it back. Without, if you don't change, it is quality. If you take it back and giving in the same period of time, it is just, you are a user of the water. Of course, you use the water, but, and there's an energy to get the water, to give it back or clean it back or take it clean. But from the water footprint perspective, if you take 100 gallons of water, and if you give that 100 gallons of water back to the same location, your water footprint is zero, because you're not a consumer of it. And hydrologically speaking, the hydrological problems and water issues starts when you consume it. If you take 100 gallons and give 50 back, so which means actually your water footprint is 50. You consumed the 50 of the 100 you took from the environment. And then, so it is important because there's a big distinction, and that's nice, because ultimately consumption is what matters for the environment. Withdrawal can be important because, for example, if you take from groundwater and give it to surface water, that's also a consumption, because ultimately you're changing the location of water. Or if you take 100 gallons polluted and give it back, you still give 100 gallons, but ultimately because of polluted and cannot be used by others, which means actually you still have a water footprint. So when you look at that perspective, it's about consumption and pollution. Another important element water footprint brings is that it is not just your direct water use. What we see is for many products, the production chain, people forget about their suppliers and supply chains. And if you just have one factory, of course, you get X amount of water, give Y amount of water back. But ultimately, you have lots of raw materials needed. Particularly, it is valid for mostly food and agricultural products that is produced. Maybe you are a bottling company, you're producing sparkling water. Or you are just a margarine and product producer, but you don't produce the milk for the margarine, and then you just buy it from somewhere else, the milk. Or maybe you are just a textile brand, I don't know, and then you just don't need any. You don't manufacture the yarn, you don't manufacture the of fabrics, or even you don't produce the t-shirt. You just buy the t-shirt and you just sell it, or you do the wet processing, whatever it is. So you might have a lots of supply chain water footprint. So water footprint of a product, when we speak about it, it is also about the supply chain water use. For example, and it can be calculated for process. You can calculate the water footprint of wet processing in textile production. You can talk about cooling, water footprint of a cooling process in a manufacturing facility. You can talk about in silicon chip production of water footprint. You can talk about glass of wine water footprint as a product. You can talk about your factory's water footprint, your business's water footprint. You can talk about water footprint of a Dutch citizen, of a US citizen. You can talk about water footprint of California. You can talk about water footprint of wherever you want to. So I want to give you some examples. These are really global averages, but think about that. To produce 1 cup of coffee, you approximately need 37 gallons of water, and it is significant water because it's ultimately 1 cup of coffee. You don't see that, I mean, visually you don't see it. It is embedded. It is in supply chain. What is it? The coffee. So the coffee produced, then the coffee is processed. Then processed coffee is went to the transported. That transported then goes to the facilities of marketing and those things. If you think about a life cycle of a product, of a coffee, then you can see that water footprint includes all water that is consumed and polluted during all these processes. That's why it is 37 gallons. Maybe it is just maybe maybe it is just like, well, how much water in this one? Less than 0.1 gallon or something like that. I don't know. It's like, for example, for this hamburger, to produce hamburger, these are global averages. If you look at, it's approximately 600 gallons of water is used. Think about the supply chain: the burger, the bread, the wheat, the meat, the feed for the animal who the meat is coming from, the onions, the field, the farm, and then processing factories, cooking, selling it, I don't know, let's say in a McDonald's, selling it in McDonald's. Everything is included, is through the supply chain. It needs approximately 600 gallons. Why? Mostly because of the feed production. Of course, today there's a big meat and dairy industry has lots of, I think their carbon footprint is also high, but also their water footprint is also very high. T-shirt, 700. Again, the cotton production, wet processing, also the selling, manufacturing, everything is included if you look at this one. You can include the sugar. I'm just skipping them. They're just for informative for you. The tomato, and you can calculate even a computer. There is car, there's computers, there's washing machines, printers. We did for steel production. We did for thermoelectric plants. We did for different industrial. I want to show you, for example, we have a database for, I hope you can see this. This is all these kind of different products. You can have all these kinds, we calculated. You can see the peat, polyethylene, all these industrial products as well, cellulose products, textiles, cement, copper, aluminium, whatever you feel like. So you can increase this any product you want and how much product you want, and that's really important. You can apply it to any product, any process you want. Water footprint has 3 components: blue, so we call it blue water footprint; green water footprint; and gray. Blue water footprint is that if you use surface water and groundwater, it is blue. And if your blue water is high, which is for manufacturing industry, mostly it's about blue water. And then it is, and then is actually you're vulnerable to water scarcity. Green water is about rainwater, but rainwater, what we mean is the soil moisture, the rainwater that is left in the soil so that the trees or crops or grass, whatever you think about the soil, can use it to grow. And it is valid only for agriculture or forestry. And it's actually, if there's an agricultural drought, there's a drought, rain is not coming, this is the first thing, your water footprint is related to that green water footprint. For manufacturing, unless you have a food and beverage and a supply chain, it's not very relevant. And this is called water consumption part. And there's a water pollution part, which is we call the gray water footprint. And then in the gray water footprint, I don't want to come to the calculations, but gray water footprint, briefly mentioning, you need to know where you dump the water, where do you discharge the water, the pollutants you give into the water in terms of the pollutant load, and also in terms of assimilation capacity of the water body where you discharge your wastewater. So it is a multi-dimensional indicator. It's not just my wastewater is 100 liters, my gray water footprint is 100. No, you need to know the pollutants is changed if you're giving to an environment a pollutant that is not allowed to give, or that is toxic, then your gray water footprint increases a huge amount. Some examples, you can see that it's actually for the apparel, is raw material production. This is the blue, green, and gray components. And you can see that's high-tech electronics. It is mostly about gray water footprints, both your productions of and end use. Beverages, of course, blue and green, the raw material. You can see biotech and pharmacologies, pharmacies and medicine and those kind of, there's really on the gray water footprint pollution. Particularly, this is a bit misleading. There must be a end use pollution as well because of like antibiotics we dumped into our wastewater systems. And you can see the forest products is really green water footprint. Metals and mining, blue and green, gray, and then blue and gray in the direct operations as well. So this is a bit brief overview. Of course, it's up to what you produce, how you produce, your technology you use, and how much you produce and everything. And when we look at the energy, of course, energy has water footprint as well. So when we look at this one, is actually, you look at this one, so the lowest water footprint is the wind, of course, and the solar. And then goes to natural and natural gas, geothermal, coal, oil, nuclear, and when you look at this one, it's actually from fossil to renewable energy is the right one. This is interesting to say. Hydropower is a high water footprint. Why? Because of the reservoirs. Reservoirs, there's a huge evaporation during the operations. And then that's actually costs lots of water to be consumed unnecessarily because those reservoirs are large surfaces, and large surfaces, there's lots of evaporation in it. And you can see there's the highest water footprint is belong to the fire root. Simply it is because of the forestry and there's lots of water needed to produce the forest. Of course, you can argue that the forest just grow naturally and you don't irrigate it. And I'm coming to that point about it. This is about one application of water footprint. So this is Netherlands, the map of the Netherlands, and Netherlands is a water-rich country as we spoke. And approximately it uses 5 kilometer cube water, which is 5,000 meter cube, which is 5 million liters, approximately 1.2 million gallons. And approximately, if you look at this, it is internal use is 5 kilometer, but its water total demand is 64 cubic meter cube. This is not important, but if you can see that is actually the water need is coming from outside its borders. Why? Because ultimately Netherlands is dependent on other countries. Like what? Gets strawberries from Spain, gets t-shirts and cotton from Turkey, India, and China, and soybean from Brazil and Argentina. This is called mutual water trade. What does it mean is that the trade of goods and commodities and embedded water, the water footprint of those products, and then you trade them, which means actually you're buying water virtually, which are the produced water, consumed water that is embedded in the products during their production. What about the US? I mean, when we look at this, is actually US is really a producing country. What we mean is that you can see that there's red ones, red values in the US, which means that your water footprint is large. And then this is Mississippi, if I'm not wrong, and you can see that it's really dark red, which is water footprint is really high. And it's actually 80% of the US water footprint lies within the US. US exports lots of products, agricultural products to the outer world, but also imports lots of products from China, India. You can see this where it is, as water footprint lies in different countries as well. So 20% of the US water footprint lies outside the US. Like what? Why? The maize from Mexico, although you produce maize, but you import maize as well. Soybeans, there's, yes, in the Mississippi Basin, there's lots of, in the Midwest US, there's lots of soybean production, but you still buy soybean from Brazil. And it's also, you buy cotton products from other countries as well. When you look at this one, it's actually, we call it net virtual. So how much virtual water goes out of the country and how much does it come out of the country. But you can see that the US is a net virtual importer, which means it exports its own water resources in terms of embedded in different products. Like you produce computers and then you sell it to other countries. And to produce that computer, there has to be a big water use has to be happening. So this is called international virtual water trade. This is one application of water footprint. I'm just mentioning it because they are the same, but it may not be for your purposes for your water efficiency and wastewater use and those kind of, and for the manufacturing businesses, unless you are doing international, multinational work, and it may not be relevant, but this is just for side information. And what are in California, the top 6 water consumed water footprint, largest water footprint? What is that? California. Of course, it is food and beverage. Of course, it is food. It is the animal feed, almonds, residential areas. This is interesting because normally you don't see that anywhere else in the world, is that residential areas, the urban water use is hard as the agricultural water use. Doesn't happen. In the Netherlands, it is maybe 1% of the water use is related to residential areas, and the rest is agriculture. But here you can see that is more than rice, grapes, and cotton, and it sees that how much Californians, people that are living in California, use a lot of water for their residential areas. Of course, you can ask the question, I use this amount of water, but I have water. For example, you can see a latte, and in a latte, you can see lots of ingredients in the supply chain. You know, for a water footprint of a latte is 208 liters, approximately globally. And it comes from the main coffee and the milk, sugar. Liters, don't forget, 208 liters means is approximately 50 gallons. And then, so divide into 4 every time you just see the liters, please. And then there's lots of elements, everything, the wrapper, this is sleeve called, and I think, and the energy used to produce this, the glue that is used to glue these things, and the ink that is used to produce the printers, and the milk, the coffee, sugar, water, everything you can see on the table needs water. But what does it mean? I mean, I have lots of water. Is it sugar beet, sugar cane, or high fructose maize sugar? I mean, that's very common, I think, in the US. In Europe, we don't have that. But where is it coming from? Is it rain-fed? Is it green water footprint? Is it blue water footprint? Or is it gray water footprint? If it is coming from water-scarce area, or is it coming from a water-rich area? If I have billions and billions of gallons of water, and if I use a bit, why does it matter if how much water my water footprint is about? So these questions are, so your water footprint high doesn't directly means you have a bad impact on the environment. So that's what we call it, water footprint assessment. So ultimately, what does it mean is that you take that number and put into a more comprehensive assessment. So you first of all calculate it, how large is your water footprint? Then you look at the local context, where you are based in your production. What is the water problem there? Is it a water pollution problem? Is it scarce water pollution? Is it drought? What can it be? Is it a flood? What is happening there? You look at the local context, and then you come to actions, what to do. So it's not about just calculating your water footprint. It's all about reduction, efficiency, water stewardship. Let me check quickly the time, and then I think, how much time approximately do we have, Preston? Hello?
You have about 15 minutes.
Okay, great.
If you want to use the 15 minutes, yeah, that we could sacrifice some of that Q&A time. Yeah.
No, please, as Q&A is nice. I will just show some examples, not going for the, I can skip a couple of slides and then I can go to more application side. Yeah. So how people use water footprint? Maybe let's use 5 to 10 minutes on this, how people use water footprint and business examples. So there are two types of uses of water footprint assessment by companies in practice. First, they look at the risk. They want to look at their vulnerabilities, or they want to address the sustainability part of it. It's actually the same thing. You look at the coin from different angles. You look at on the left side, which is your vulnerability and risk, because you're water dependent. But also on the other side, you're just impacting that water. It's the same thing, but how you phrase it is different. So this is sustainability. It is what we see with many companies that we work with is the key concept they produce to the outside world where they communicate. And when they look at the internal work, they're more interested in the dependencies, the vulnerabilities, and the risk, financial cost of it, and then everything. I'm just skipping this, and then this we can share with the graphics. That's so what they mean, how they do it. This might be relevant for your manufacturing industries. Is that so? The water footprint sustainability. It's about two levels: product level. It's about water efficiency or water productivity for agriculture, which means how much water you use. This meter cube per ton. You can say that gallon per what is ton in what is the mass in US is a per ton of product, or I think it's tons as well, US tons, and how much gallons of water you use per ton of or unit production. This is important, but also there's a geographical information, which means how much gallons of water in total you do in annual basis or periodical basis. What happens is that this is nice because this shows how efficient you are, but ultimately your impact to the environment, it's about the total amount of use. When you look at all these corporate disclosures and everything, people mostly talk about product level ones because it's easy to talk. I reduced 1 gallon per my bottle of drink. I reduced 1 gallon. I use 1 gallon less, but it doesn't say anything because maybe you produce million units more. Ultimately, your impact is related to. So when you look at the water footprint sustainability or water footprint assessment, if you do for a company, you can look at efficiency, but also you can look at how much in total you use. And then ultimately you want to reduce both. Of course, if you reduce your product level, you can also reduce your geographical level in general. Sustainable water use is about not only your use, but also, for example, these are different companies in a location. Company A uses this much, there's still water. Company B uses this much, there's still water. C uses no problem. Company D uses this problem. But when another user comes, problem starts. The problem starts when everything is over this red dotted line. And then when you have, then you ask your question, what we can do. So this is about corporate water stewardship. What we mean is that it is not about you. It's also about your neighbors. You have to work together. I mean, you can be efficient. You may not even use 1 liter, 1 gallon of water, but maybe your neighbor uses a lot and it directly affects you as well, impacts you as well. Or you're still not very sustainable because of your neighbor, simply to say. So water is just a collective issue as well, common good. And I think for businesses, this is important to understand as well. I'm skipping this. We can, this is geographical. I want to show you this one. So this is a textile. So this is, we did for, I'm hiding this with this blue bar, rectangle, hiding the names of the companies because it's private. And so what this graph shows two things. There are pink bars and there are blue bars. Blue bars shows efficiency of, so each bar indicates a company and they produce the same fabric of textile products, same fabric. They're wet processing, which means they're not cotton producers, but they buy the yarn, produce the fabric, wash it, dye it, and everything. And then they produce a colored fabric or finished t-shirt, whatever. And so when you look at these blue bars, it shows for ton of fabric how much water they use. So this guy uses approximately 400 100 gallon. This guy is excellent, but this guy is really efficient. You can see that it's approximately 25 gallons he uses. So the blue bars indicate the efficiency, but the pink ones, the pink bars, use how much they use in total. For example, this guy, the one, I hope you can see the browser. And then this blue bar, he's very efficient. The blue bar is really low, but his pink bar is really high. Why? He produces a lot. He's the biggest producer in the region. This guy, the one on the right, is, you see, he's not efficient at all. So the problem, how do you solve this problem? You just increase his efficiency. You put some technologies, recycling and everything. But with this guy, he's already efficient. What can you do? But this guy is the major problem in this location because although he's efficient, he uses least possible amount of water for unit product it produces. Look at this, but he still is the major problem. So that's what I mean is the product efficiency versus product in total amount of use of water. And then these two companies, water solutions is different. This one, which is very efficient, is water reuse. What I mean is it's continuously the same water amount and changing and using again, or recycle or reclaim water or wastewater reuse. And this is maybe more on technological efficiency measures. So it's a different assessment. Who are these people? A big international company asked us to look at all the suppliers. He's buying t-shirts from the suppliers globally. This is what a big apparel company does. Look at all, I don't know, the brand, but there's called Inditex. It has 1,000 different suppliers globally in the world. I'm skipping this. So what can we do in manufacturing? How can you reduce your water footprint? First of all, you can do full recycling, water resources, or the material production. What I mean is that if you recycle the materials, you also save water. If you use less pollutants, for example, the chemicals, if I can find that one, just let me go to this slide because I have lots of, for example, this is different chemicals used for the same purpose. This is pesticides use, but you can also look at, so please look at the chemicals you're using and impacting the impacts. The same chemical, same purpose, different chemicals used. And you can see that is actually, one of the water footprints is so high, some of them are really low. The purpose is the same. Why does it happen? Because actually when we buy some chemicals, or we don't think about in the supply chain what their effects could be on, because every chemical has a different hazardous toxicity, different different concentrations, different assimilation capacity in the treatment facilities or in the environment that is disposed to. So we have to think about not only our operations, but also the chemicals we buy, the materials we buy. So I wanted to show you that one. In this one. And then what can you do in agriculture? You can simple measures like mulching, manure use. You can use deficit irrigation. You don't need to water all the time. You can, as actually we've shown in many studies, that irrigation, deficit irrigation, where is actually you reduce little yield. The yield is not much lost, but the water is really a lot of saved, instead of doing lots of precise irrigation, those kind of things. And the technology in these days improved a lot. These drones in Europe, I'm sure in the US is used as well. Drones, and then drone technology says about the water needs of the crops and everything. So the meat, and so that it can be accounted, it can be understood when to water the environment. I'm skipping this as well. So this is what the companies do. I think this is my last slide, is that the small, medium companies, they look at their operations. When you grow or your supply chain is important, then you look at this supply chain information. Then that is not enough either. You have to do some collective action and watershed management. What I mean is that you have to work with your neighbors, you have to work with the people who are living there and find a common solutions to share the water, to understand what's the impact of your use and others' uses, and to sit together at a table and decide on how to manage it together. Of course, it's all about public policy at the end. You have to work with the politicians, and you have to be transparent and show your efforts to the outer world so people can learn from you and you can learn from others as well. This is, we call it maturation towards water stewardship journey. And when companies get larger and larger, bigger in size in terms of the financial and then the people working or supply chains or the factories, they start from direct operations and they see that it is not enough and then continue the journey along these steps. For example, the Coca-Cola is thus coming to this one. On public policy, they go and talk to the governments in the world. Or Apple comes and goes to the governments in the world, can, for example, talk to giant Chinese governments and talk at the factories there. And then that's why we work with Apple as well in several occasions. So they don't share, and they don't like to share much, but they come to the community engagement, public policy. At Pepsi likes disclosing, they come to the transparency. Some other brands, so the big brands comes towards end of this journey. And if you are a small producer, just business to business or business to consumers, you can start with direct operations. The importance is water footprint reduction in terms of going to a zero water footprint in blue, and hopefully you don't need to pollute if you recycle all well, or the others use symbiosis. Is, in the industrial parks, there's lots of symbiosis can happen. It can be used, the water, wastewater, for other purposes and material flows. And these are solutions for reduction of water footprint. And this is one thing. This is the investors do. And for the risk assessments, this is a Dutch investor. It is a big, look at this. They invest all these factors globally. They don't have any US, but what they do, they have this tool in their computers and they want to invest your factor here in a spot. They check it. They get all kind of information about water footprints, water pollution, all kind of criterias. And they give you money. And that's in the beginning of my presentation. I started with this, whether they want to give you money or not. So we develop such tools using the water footprint to them. And this is one of the applications. I know that big banks or big investors do that in many parts of the world. I assume it happens in the US as well. Thanks a lot. If you have any questions or anything you want to talk and discuss, I think I talked a lot. I hope I can give you in this short time and some inspiration, some knowledge, and that you can use in your life and in your work. And please let me know if you have any questions or anything.
I do have one question that isn't technical in nature. I wonder what really spurred the development of the water footprint network, because it really was radically different. And I do know around the year 2007 that they had the UN CEO water mandate. Was that the catalyst? And also related to that, I lived in Stockholm for 2 years. And every time I do any research on water, there's always a conference on water in Stockholm. And I know the Water Footprint Network used to hang out there a lot. You know, they were always visiting. Can you talk about the dynamic of how this all kind of, was this the catalyst for all this?
So,
or was it just coincidental that because the Water Footprint Network as an organization came into being around, well, at least as far as I could research, around 2008. So was the time right and all the energy was there, and the energy with this community, people like yourself, did it force the UN to come up with the CEO Water Compact?
So it's actually in Water Footprint Network is established 2007, and that's the year I started with Ercin Hoekstra.
Right.
It was my PhD, actually. That's the same time I started with working with him in his university. He was my supervisor. So how did it happen is that, so Ercin Hoekstra started is in science. So the difference between carbon and water footprint is that carbon footprint was born from businesses. Or it doesn't originate from science. Of course, there's energy footprint, but water footprint originates from science, and is about water management in resources and management and then river basin. But then what happened is that it gets in 2007 and 8 very much attention from different stakeholders and the businesses, big businesses. There are 5 businesses. One of them is the Dutch government. The other one is Coca-Cola and Unilever, and the big companies in the world. 5 to 6 companies sit together with Ercin, and they decided to establish a network which is called Water Footprint Network, so that they can share information together. And it's a business-driven initiative originally, and then it grew up a lot. UN Water Mandate is actually the signature happened during the same time, but from signature of the CEOs of big companies. It's happening at the same time. So the Water Footprint Network brought in the picture of the supply chain thinking. So before that, supply chain thinking was not much on the table. And then, I think in WWF in Europe and Nature Conservancy in the US, and they also were part of Water Footprint Network. So they worked together with these companies and built the network. And it's when it is funded, there were more than 200 partners. And it's not active anymore, unfortunately, because there is not much need. The companies, big companies, embedded the information and how they solve it, how they look at it into their core identity. And I'm happy to say that many companies, the big ones, of course, the international ones, are having this water footprint thinking. Now it is spreading to more business to business type of companies or more manufacturing type of companies. There's ISO, and it continues more now on water footprint for conscience's mission on a more how we can give this kind of disseminate more by tradings, and then we do some projects for governments. We try to influence now. It was started with businesses. Now we try to influence the governments, because of public policy. For example, one of the things that we did with the EU Green Deal is we try to talk to the European Commission and then make advocate of how to use it, what can be done. There are some policy documents that has changed, altered maybe. If that can happen, that will be the next step of achievement.
What you did today was magnificent. I just hope we can figure out how to get you back here for a bigger session.
Thank you so much to Dr. Ercin for giving this presentation for ASCM San Diego chapter. Please check out our upcoming events, webinars and classes on our website displayed here.